They had 1 hour to save 700 men, and the only tool they had was a wooden aircraft flying at treetop height. In the winter of 1944, inside a cold stone prison on the outskirts of Amiens in German-occupied France, men were waiting to die. Not soldiers captured in open battle, not enemy combatants taken in uniform. These were French civilians, teachers, farmers, railway workers, shopkeepers, priests, men and women who had made one quiet, dangerous decision to resist German occupation and had been caught, arrested, and thrown inside Amiens prison to await the consequences. And in Nazi-occupied France, the consequences were almost always the same. The Gestapo did not imprison resistors indefinitely. They interrogated them, extracted information, and then either sent them east to the concentration camps or stood them against a wall and shot them. By early 1944, the Gestapo had been unusually busy in the Amiens region. Hundreds of French resistance members were locked inside the prison. Some had already been sentenced. Some were simply waiting while German officers decided what to do with them. A significant number were scheduled for execution. Some reports suggest as many as 120 men were facing firing squads within days. The French resistance knew this, and somehow word reached London. What happened next involves a question that historians still debate quietly among themselves, because the order that came back from London was not try to bribe the guards or organize an escape tunnel or flood the Germans with false intelligence. The order in its most essential form was this: destroy the prison walls, blow the gates open, kill the German guards inside, and give those prisoners a chance to run. From the air, at rooftop height, in winter, the aircraft selected for Operation Jericho was the de Havilland Mosquito. If you know anything about World War II aviation, you understand why this choice made sense. The Mosquito was one of the most extraordinary aircraft produced by any nation during the entire war. Built primarily from wood, a decision born from metal shortages that turned out to be inspired, it was fast enough to outrun most German fighters, agile enough to fly at extremely low altitudes, and precise enough to deliver bombs with accuracy that heavy bombers could never match. Pilots who flew it called it the most beautiful machine the RAF ever built. They also called it unforgiving. The Mosquito demanded skill, concentration, and nerve in quantities that eliminated average pilots quickly. To fly one well, especially at low level in formation over enemy territory in winter weather, required a particular kind of airman. Group Captain Percy Pickard was that kind of airman. Pickard was already famous inside the RAF before Operation Jericho. He had led the Bruneval raid in 1942, the operation that captured German radar technology intact from a coastal installation. He had flown bombers, special operations missions, and enough combat hours to fill a book. He was 30 years old, tall, and apparently constitutionally incapable of looking afraid. He was given command of the Amiens mission. The planning that went into Operation Jericho in the days before February 18th was meticulous and ruthless at the same time. Detailed intelligence on the prison layout was gathered through French resistance contacts. The building was studied carefully. The walls, specifically which walls needed to breach to allow prisoners maximum chance of escape, were identified precisely. The location of the German guardhouse inside the prison compound was noted. The surrounding roads, fields, and escape routes were mapped. Then came the brutal calculation at the center of everything, to blow open the outer walls and the cell block doors with enough force to be useful. The bombs would have to hit specific sections of the building within meters of accuracy. There was no margin for error. Bombs falling short would land in the fields around the prison. Bombs overshooting would fly past the target entirely, and bombs hitting the wrong section of the building would kill the prisoners they were trying to free. The pilots understood this completely. They would fly at low level. Some accounts describe the final approach altitude at between 50 and 100 feet above the ground. They would cross the prison at just enough height to clear the rooftop before releasing their bombs. Any lower, and they would fly into their own blast. Any higher, and the precision required would be impossible. 18 Mosquitoes were assembled, 3 waves, 6 aircraft per wave. Each wave assigned specific sections of the building. First wave, breach the outer perimeter walls. Second wave, hit the German guardhouse and internal cell block sections. Third wave, held in reserve. If the first 2 waves succeeded and the prison was already breached with prisoners escaping, the third wave would not attack. If the first 2 waves had failed, the third wave would try again, even with prisoners potentially inside the damaged structure. Film mosquitoes from the RAF film production unit were assigned to document the entire raid, because London wanted to know exactly what happened, whatever the outcome. February 18, 1944 began with weather that should have cancelled the mission. Northern France was locked under a thick grey sky. Snow lay across the fields. Visibility was poor. The flight from England across the Channel and over occupied France would be complicated by cloud cover that could break formation cohesion and make the low-level approach even more dangerous than it already was. The meteorological briefing that morning was not encouraging. Pickard made the decision to go anyway. The executions were scheduled. The window was closing. There would not be another ideal day. If there was ever going to be a moment, it was now. The Mosquitoes took off from RAF Hunsdon in Hertfordshire that morning in formation, accompanied by an escort of Hawker Typhoon fighter bombers from New Zealand squadrons, whose job was to deal with any German fighter response over the target area. They flew low across the English Channel, low enough that the German coastal radar installations had difficulty tracking them clearly. Over France, they dropped even lower. Accounts from the mission describe the formation skimming across snow-covered fields at rooftop height, navigating by landmarks visible from cockpits, roads, tree lines, railway tracks, church steeples. At the speeds the Mosquito flew, there was almost no reaction time between identifying a landmark and being past it. The pilots and their navigators worked together in constant conversation, cross-checking position against timing, making micro-corrections to stay on the precise approach track that led to a specific building on the edge of a specific town in a country that would shoot them down without hesitation. At 12:03 in the afternoon, the first wave reached Amiens. The attack happened so fast that initial German anti-aircraft response was almost non-existent. The lead Mosquitoes came in from the north, flying along the straight road that led directly towards the prison like an arrow on a map. Eyewitness accounts from French civilians in the town describe aircraft so low they could see the pilots' faces. Some people threw themselves flat instinctively. The first bombs hit the eastern perimeter wall and blew a section completely apart. The second section of the outer wall came down seconds later. Then the first wave was past the prison, pulling up hard over the rooftops and banking away. The second wave came in almost immediately behind them. These bombs targeted the northern wall and the section of the building that housed the German guard quarters. The guardhouse took direct hits. The northern wall of the prison collapsed. Inside the prison, the effect of the explosions was complete chaos. Cell doors were blown open by the concussive force. Walls cracked and sections collapsed. Prisoners who had been sitting in their cells suddenly found themselves looking at open sky where stone walls had stood minutes before, and they ran. What followed in the minutes after the bombs hit was a scene that no military planner could have fully scripted. Prisoners poured out through the breached walls in every direction. Some ran straight across the snow-covered fields surrounding the prison. Some helped wounded prisoners escape. Some grabbed German guards' weapons in the confusion. French civilians in nearby areas who understood what was happening opened doors and hid escapees before German patrols could respond. German soldiers who survived the attack on the guardhouse scrambled to organize a response. Some prisoners were recaptured within minutes. Others were shot attempting to escape in the open fields. but many ran far enough fast enough. Of the estimated 700 prisoners inside Amiens prison at the time of the raid, somewhere between 258 and 280 managed to escape successfully. Of those, the French resistance was able to move a significant number to safety before German security forces could recover them. The mission achieved its fundamental purpose. Prisoners scheduled for execution were free, but Operation Jericho did not come without cost. As the RAF formation pulled away from the target area, German fighters scrambled to intercept. In the confused air battle that followed over occupied France, several Mosquitoes were hit. And Percy Pickard, the man who had led the mission, the pilot who had made the call to fly despite the weather, the officer who had planned and rehearsed and prepared every detail, was shot down. His Mosquito was hit by a German FW-190 fighter while turning away from the target area. The aircraft went down. Pickard and his navigator, Flight Lieutenant Bill Broadley, were killed on impact. They did not survive to see whether the men they had just freed made it to safety. Pickard was 30 years old.